point or another, I've cried while reading all of these books. Not great for the seasonal depression. It has been a weird month books-wise. I didn't get to as many as I might have wanted to. At first I was completely drained after those Vasakina books. I've swallowed them whole in far too quick of a succession, so I just needed a break. Then life got in the way of my reading. The audacity. Still, let's talk, but it's gonna be a weird assortment of books this month. How cute is this mug? So I was trying to get back into the groove of reading early in the month, so I was picking lighter titles. First it was Le Coeur Synthétique by Chloe Delaume, a synthetic heart, which was translated into Russian as Heart of Adelaide after the protagonist. This is such a terrible move, not that I know the original title, because the heart is kind of at the center of the story, so I may have wanted to know the original title that the author intended for it to have, but hey-ho. So at first I was worried that I'm gonna abandon the book because the central theme of the book couldn't be further from me. The book talks about this woman, Adelaide, who's in her 40s, and she's just gotten a divorce, and she tries to piece her life back together and find herself a new man. This need for a man in her life is foundational to her entire being. She cannot imagine her life without one. All of her choices in life, her clothing, where she lives, what she eats, is all defined by a man in her life. And now she doesn't have one, and worse than that, she's been off the dating market for over a decade now, and now that she's in her late 40s, she's not that appealing to the opposite sex. Now, straight from the bat, couldn't care less about finding a man, but moreover, I don't care for this type of character whose entire life goal is finding a man. Not my cup of tea. Cheers. But as I was reading the story, I kind of felt for Adelaide more and more. Yes, maybe her quest is misguided, in my opinion, but she's honest in it, both with herself and others. Well, the men in her life are very much not, even if they claim that they are, and that's something already that we might all be familiar with. And it is kind of fun reading up about Adelaide coming up with all of these scenarios in her mind about a man she's just met the day before, how they get married, what kind of life they're going to have, what kind of choices, where they're going to live, all of that. And it's also kind of heartbreaking to learn that the man is actually married, even though he's given her his number and invited her on a date. Douchebag is going to douchebag, I guess. What I really loved about the book is that once we get closer to the ending, the author goes, well, you see, this could happen to Adelaide. She might marry this man, and then this, and this would happen. But she also might not, and then this and this would happen. But whatever happens, she's going to end up here. And then she tells the epilogue. And I love this ambiguity for the protagonist's future, how it's not all written out for her, while also providing this certainty for her later years. But also, weirdly, it's the weaker part of the story because the epilogue plays into the sisterhood angle, how Adelaide spends her later years with her closest female friends. It goes kind of feminist in the end, which I do support, but the text does not. The girlfriends were present throughout the story, but they were never this tight-knit group or all that supportive. They were simply there while Adelaide went on her husband-searching quest. So this theme comes out of nowhere, and I do not like that. As I was trying to find if the book has been translated into English, by the looks of it, it has not. Whoops. I looked up the author, and it looks like she has some books that are directly about feminism, so that makes some sense, but it also doesn't make this book better. The sisterhood angle has not been set up at all. So in the end, it's not a terrible book, but it's not great either. And also the least amount of tears spilled over it out of the books of this month. I think we're going to go up as the list continues. So this book tricked me. So I honestly fell for the cover and the summary. I was still kind of looking for the lighter titles, so I was like, yeah, let's try that. This book reads like the author had an idea for a movie script, but for whatever reason decided to write a book instead. And you honestly can say that for a lot of contemporary romance books, but I really felt it here. So the premise of Stepping Up by Sarah Turner is that we have this protagonist called Beth. She is kind of the screw up of the family. She can never keep a job, can keep a relationship. She isn't serious, constantly goes out to pubs with her best friend and such. Until one day, her sister and brother-in-law end up in a car accident, and she has to take care of their children, her niece and nephew. As far as books of this caliber go, it isn't terrible. It's perfectly adequate, or at least inoffensive. I didn't scream at it as I did with some other contemporary books that I've read this year. I enjoyed reading about the dynamics within this family. Beth and her sister have this overbearing mother and enabler father, so that's already a conflict right there. One of the kids is a rebellious teenage girl, so there's growth potential for both her and Beth. The other kid is an adorable 3-year-old, so it adds cuteness and heartbreak to all of this story. So there is a lot going on there. And I do actually believe that Beth does grow and transform over the course of the story. Unfortunately, most of it is told to us and not shown, but I've set the bar really low for this book, so I will take what I can. One of the things I didn't really love about this book is that the author uses the cheapest tricks in the book to make me cry. And the premise is sad enough as it is, as this family goes through the loss in the family, and yet the author still goes for the easiest source of tears, children and old people. There are 2 examples that I can bring up here. Beth befriends an elderly neighbor of his sister's, a man who's been living alone since his wife died and they never had kids. And so Beth and him establish a tradition of sorts. And one time they're supposed to do something that is really important for the old man. And Beth accidentally ends up standing him up. And the author spends a lot of time emphasizing how sad it was that he was waiting there for her and how all of the people felt sad for him. And I'm like, come on. Or, for example, when Beth comes to pick up her 3-year-old nephew from daycare, and one of the new workers there accidentally tells him that his mother has come to pick him up, and he runs out all excited, but it's not his mom, because his mom has been in an accident. And I'm like, why are you doing this to me? Yes, I've cried because I'm not an animal, but you shouldn't be proud for eliciting tears from me in this way. But also, I've told you that this book has tricked me, didn't I? Well, all of the things that I've just said, all about Beth and her family, the children, the neighbors, and all of that, that is all generously 60% of the book. The rest of it is romance, friends to lovers to be exact. And honestly, I didn't need it here. As far as this trope goes, again, not terribly written, but also nothing to write home about. A lot of very basic kind of miscommunications, misunderstandings, and I'm like, here, why? Why is it here? I wanted to read a story about family coming together in the face of loss and tragedy, and not about how Beth really wants to bang her best friend. Thank you. Next. Now we're really getting to the good books. A Single Swallow by a Chinese author, Ling, was really, really solid. I don't think I can come up with another title by a Chinese author that I've read. I need to do better. A Single Swallow is a novel in a more traditional sense, very reminiscent of great epics, as in it has plot and themes, but the themes are not outwardly stated, but rather they blossom in the characters' actions. The plot is World War II, stay with me, and the Americans have set up a base in a Chinese village somewhere to train the locals to fight the invading Japan. Somehow, when I think of World War II, China never comes to mind, but they were part of it, yes. The pre-existing conflict with Japan just bled into the world conflict, and oh my god, did the Japanese do some awful shit there. Anyways, Zhang does an interesting thing here. All of our narrators are dead, they're ghosts. These 3 men who've met on this American base, and when the war was over, promised each other that they would come back to this base once they're dead. One dies very soon after their parting, another lives another couple of years, and the third one lives into his 90s. But they do all keep their promise, and they meet, and they talk about one thing that they truly have in common, the woman that they all claim to have loved. One man calls her Wind, the other calls her Stella, the third one calls her Ai Yang, but we really only get to see her through their eyes. They tell this story of a young, uneducated girl from a middle of nowhere Chinese village who's been thrown into the middle of this war. And these three men who've affected her life, yes, but all of whom have betrayed her in some way, willingly or not. As I was reading the novel, it reminded me quite a bit of Remark, but maybe it's the World War setting that was throwing me there. I've read Remark like years ago now, so I cannot say that for certain. What the novel actually reminded me of quite a bit was Dr. Zhivago. Also a great epic with characters like coming and going in the middle of the war where nothing is certain, and a love story that maybe is not that lovely after all. And I did love this novel. It does really well with the narrative choice of having first-person narration of the events long past. It also adds a little bit of flavor of unreliable narrator because our memories are rarely that reliable. The setting and the events, they work. The character work is present as well. What I loved most is the choice that we only get to see the main character, the girl, through the eyes of these men. So we do get to see different sides of her transformation, her growth over the course of the story, but also there is a lot about her that we never get to see because the men are not present for it. So there is this whole world of her that neither we nor these men get to know, but at least we can acknowledge that while the men believe that they know everything there is to know about her. It's also actually interesting to see how these men view her and what they tell about her. For example, one of the men, the one that she reciprocates the affection of, they have some sort of courtship, and he never describes their meetings in any particular great detail, not necessarily because he doesn't want to share them, but it looks like he either doesn't remember or care, while other men can recall like the color of the dress that she was wearing when they first met. And thus, through the interactions with her, these men show who they really are. Sometimes they show their uglier sides, sometimes less so, but no less awkwardly. And it is a story of love, of hardship, of betrayal, of second chances. Our single swallow had to go through it all. But she's also persevered. She's known love. She's known true loyalty. So there is still hope there. The story deals with heavy subjects. You cannot tell a World War II story any other way, but there is still light in there that shines through. So if you're looking for a great epic to read, I can definitely recommend this one. It's on a lengthier side, but I was never truly bored with it. I've also seen comments mention that the sexual assault scenes go graphic. I didn't see that. It is told as it is, but it's not reveling in it. I should also say that they've done a marvelous job with the Russian translation of the book, and I do hope that the English one also does justice to the text. The Swimmers by Julie Otsuka is a not but brilliant book. A little bit of a backstory. When I'm looking for books to read, I browse through my reading app, kind of looking at covers, reading summaries, and adding things that catch my eye to my TBR. I almost never read them as soon as I see them. They need to sit in my TBR for a little bit. And so when I pick books to read from my TBR, I don't reread summaries, so I go into the books more or less blind. Why am I telling you this? Well, The Swimmers has two very distinct parts. Part one is about a communal swimming pool and the swimmers that go there. That's it. The book is written in these short sentences, like sentence fragments almost, and in this first part, every single sentence can be all we get about any particular character. Like, for example, I don't know, here's Jeffrey, he forgot his shoes and never came back for them. There's Sue, she swims in the fast lane. There's George, he only comes in when he needs a break. Just the small list of details and fragments about all of these different characters. Otsuka describes the swimming pool as almost a sacred place. Like the life outside of it for these characters is completely secondary, and they only feel alive when they come to swim in this underground pool. All of these odd characters, they love to swim, all for their own reasons, and they all build this tapestry of various characters united by this single location. The second chapter throws in a wrench, however. There is a crack at the bottom of the pool and nobody knows what it means or why it's there. They all react in different ways. Some pretend that it's not there, as if I don't look at it, it's going to go away. Others try to fix it, but it doesn't work and it only grows bigger. And at that point, you can probably guess that it is a metaphor and it is an allegory, except I wasn't sure what for. It is ambiguous. Some illness instantly comes to mind, but I was also thinking climate change. Because the text is so allegorical, there is no plot, just the swimming pool and the swimmers in it, and the crack now. So really, it could have been anything. But had I remembered the summary for the book, I would have known. Because the second part of the book is a raw and honest account of an experience of a woman who is suffering from late-stage dementia. One chapter is dedicated to things that she can no longer remember, another one to the things that she does, and another chapter is describing the care facility that she's been placed in and her experience there, as well as the experience of her loved ones. I don't know what it is with me and books about parents dying. I need to stop. The text reads really personal for Otsuka. I had it confirmed now via Wikipedia, but it is clear within the text as well that she's talking about her mother, and she is working through this trauma of losing a loved one even before they're truly gone. And it is powerful. I don't think that I have words to properly describe it here. How can I do justice to the emotion that permeates this text? I would think that only Otsuka's own words are suitable here. And if you're willing to go on this journey down the memory lane with her, it is so worth it. Yes, it's not going to be all sunshine and roses, but there is still so much love there, and grief and sadness and affection and all of it. These chapters are also written in these short sentences and sentence fragments, and I think this style particularly suits the theme of dementia when a person can no longer form long thoughts. The only thing to mention here is that I'm not sure how well the metaphor of swimming pool works with the theme of dementia. I should probably go back and reread the first chapters with that lens on, because right now I'm not 100% on it. But the book is brilliant regardless, and you should read it. Just simply trust the process and understand that there is not going to be a plot, just images and emotions. But speaking of emotion, nobody invokes more in me than Backman. Bold statement, to be sure, but I've just finished My Friends, and that's how I feel. If you've never read anything by Fredrik Backman, I do recommend that you do. This one is his latest, and it is very much a Backman book. Backman's style is very much rooted in the emotional connection that he builds between you and his characters. His characters normally come from the lowest walks of life, and he shines a light on them so they sparkle like diamonds. They are always outcasts, oddballs, people who are socially inept, who do not fit in, but they all do contain multitudes. This book has an assortment of characters, essentially a pack, this group of teenagers who are all outcasts for a variety of reasons, but who found each other and they stick together. When they acquire a new member of the group, they are all excited. Oh, he's one of us. And that's the thing that I also love about Backman, because he leans into this found family angle that I adore. They are all a little broken, but they all have this great capacity for love. They simply show it in different ways, and only to people who are worthy of it. Backman carries a lot of love for his characters. He cares for them, but he also puts them in the most horrid of situations. Backman doesn't have that American sensitivity of censoring what's going on, so there is a lot in his books that can be actually really triggering. Like, for example, domestic violence, sexual assault, substance abuse, just to name a few. But he also tries to interrogate these vices and maybe add more dimension to the people who suffer from them, commit them, or simply stand by them. It can become uncomfortable at times and a little bit far-fetched, but I do believe that he adds a nuance to this conversation that we really need to have. This book, for example, he talks about domestic violence, and he specifically shines light on witnesses, people who do know that there is something going on, but they turn a blind eye. The world is rarely black and white, so an abuser is rarely just that. He's also a father, a husband, a friend, a member of the community, churchgoer, and all of these things can be true at once, but they never negate the abuse angle. And it's still difficult for people who know him as this one thing to also accept this other thing. So they try to push it out of their minds if they can. And it's nuance like that Backman really wants to talk about. He never tries to find excuses for the abuser. He simply wants to look what the victims feel for their abuser and what the witnesses feel as well. Or he has characters who are mentally abusive, like another character's mother. She's done real harm to her son's self-worth and self-image, but she was also fighting her own demons at the time, and in her own twisted way, she was simply trying to help. What she did was unforgivable, yes, but it is important for us to know why she did what she did. So the story is never simply about a kid who comes from an abusive home, or another kid who's afraid of being gay because his brother would beat him up for it, or another who's been so put down by his family that he doesn't see his own talent. It is a story about them, yes, but also about all of these people that surround them, all of these men and women who've done them harm, and giving them a chance and a voice as well. And maybe, just maybe, they have a capacity for change. That said, you have a core cast of characters that you fall in love with, and they go through hardships, and your heart bleeds for them. This book, I've cried throughout. There is a lot of sadness there, a lot of pain, but also a lot of heart-tugging elements, like when a person manages to build trust with a victim of sexual assault, or when a boy who's been picked on by a teacher and all of the kids finds solace in a friend, or when a kid throws out the pills he's been stealing. All of it kind of tugs at your heartstrings. It kind of overwhelms you and the tears come pouring out, and about 70% of the book is like that. Backman has this amazing ability to make me cry over the sad parts or the heartwarming parts, and here I am sitting tears streaming down my face, it's not coming out of my nose. And then in the next moment, he manages to make me laugh out loud. He strikes that balance like no other author between this deep emotionality and lightheartedness to ease some of that tension. I also liked the sense of humor that he uses in this particular book. It's childish, but even his 40-year-old characters are still 14 deep down. And this type of humor was really needed here to balance out the seriousness of some other themes. Because the Backman says it within the text as well, please do not think that this story only has darkness in it. There is also so much laughter in it. And there is love, and there's trust, and there's affection, and there's friendship. It is what's at the core of this story. These teenagers running under a sprinkler, of them jumping off of the pier into the water, or them nursing a bird back to health, or this painting that captures their laughter on the last summer they spent together. It probably also bears mentioning that Backman sometimes goes for the feel-good ending, the vanilla one, if you will, and I really felt it here. He does this thing where he tells a story and you know part of the ending because the story is told in flashbacks, and some of the characters are present in the current day storyline and some of them are not. And the freaking Chekhov's gun has been hanging on the wall since the very beginning, so I was kind of prepping myself for a way worse ending. And then he pivoted into something much more life-affirming. And I was a little bit thrown off as I was reading it, but upon reflection, it's for the best. Yes, maybe it's unrealistic, but who cares? I've fallen in love with these characters since chapter 4, and it doesn't even end that well for all of them, so why can it be a positive ending for those that are there? I constantly bitch about sad endings, so why cannot this book have this instead? Why can't a victim of domestic abuse find love and happiness? Why can't an abusive brother change his ways and find himself a nice wife and rebuild trust with his brother? Why can't a cute conductor go on a date with one of our guys, maybe? Why can't a girl from the foster home find these guys who become her found family? I never told you what this book is really about. You can read the summary if you want. It says it all. The 4 teenagers on their last summer together, and a painting that changes the life of a different person 25 years later. What I really wanted to share was what I felt while reading this book. And I probably didn't do a good enough job of that either. I've only finished the book the day before, and I probably would have loved to sit on it a little bit more to properly write out my feelings on it. But hey ho, it is what it is. It's the end of the month. I need to get this video out. I'll let you know next time if I've missed anything important here. In December, I need to find jollier titles, for fuck's sake.